So hello everyone, my name is Wolfgang Hankeln and I'm sitting here with Ian Selter. And today we're going to talk about the GSC14. Could you please first of all introduce yourself and also talk a little bit about the fields of research that you work on?
Sure, yeah. So I'm Ian Selter. I'm based in Banyuls-sur-Mer, which has a marine station in the northwest Mediterranean. So I have two roles. I'm an independent researcher, but I'm also responsible for managing the observation service in Banyuls. So my own research is observational biogeochemistry, mainly focusing on phosphorus biogeochemistry because this is a limiting nutrient in this environment.
All right, so this is now the 14th GSC meeting. Have you been at a GSC meeting before?
No, it's my first.
Okay, and what were the topics that were particularly interesting?
Well, we became involved, or at least aware of the GSC through the Ocean Sampling Day and the potential of forming this genomics observatory. So I think this GSC14 meeting is, brought together a lot of these observatories that were involved in the Ocean Sampling Day pilot projects, and so that was the main reason for coming, to kind of interact with people in similar situations.
So this is now the third day. What is your impression? What are the benefits in taking part in the GSC, and what does the GSC offer to a wider community?
Yeah, I think one of the things that struck me since I've been here is just the depth and range of knowledge amongst different participants. So, we're coming from a very specific environment of kind of observation, but it's been very useful to find out about a lot of things about standards in particular, and a lot of the legal issues which are associated with these large-scale collaborative projects across international boundaries. That's something that, as scientists, we're not necessarily aware of the legal implications, but something that's becoming increasingly relevant for these collaborative projects. So it's been very useful from that point of view to learn about all of these different processes involved in these collaborative projects, which extend beyond, just posing the scientific questions.
So from your point of view, what is a genomic observatory?
So I think a genomic observatory, and my response might be kind of a little marine-centered because that's the background that I'm coming from, but I think a genomic observatory it's an additional depth layer on top of the kind of normal observational activities that we have. So in addition to characterizing the kind of biogeochemistry of an ecosystem, what this really brings is an opportunity to characterize biological populations through genomic technology, and to try and combine that with the existing detailed measurements that we already make to try to look at the impacts on diversity and the effects that might have on the function of an ecosystem. So I guess a genomic observatory is really, is an additional layer on top of our traditional observation activities.
So why do you think, now considering also taking part in this GOES initiative, what are the benefits in taking part in this initiative?
I think there are several benefits. One is knowledge exchange. Getting involved with people who are doing similar measurements and standardizing protocols, rather than being isolated and designing our own research questions, which we will still continue to do, but being able to place that into a wider context and the opportunity to kind of integrate our own network into these larger networks, I think is a really excellent opportunity. And also it's an issue of visibility. So we're trying to promote our station, we're trying to promote the activities that we do there, and I think being involved in a large-scale project like this it's a nice label to have for the station, to show that we are interacting with the international community.
It's a joint global scale effort. What do you think, once this consistent data set is compiled, what are the questions that can be answered, which was maybe previously impossible?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. It depends a little bit how the network evolves, and that will in turn depend on the people that get involved. But one issue is how able we are to address the importance of imposing these standards on the measurements. So this is only something that can be achieved through a large-scale project like this, in which people normally collect samples in a variety of different ways and then analyze them independently and compare them with published literature. And there's normally very little detail paid to the different methods that are used. One of the advantages of the GEOS network is that even if it's just for one day in the year, if we can all use standardized protocols, then it gives us some kind of handle on how we can address the importance of imposing these standards. From a more scientific point of view, I think some of the big questions that can be addressed are the issues between diversity and function. In order to address those questions, you need to cover a large enough range of ecosystems where you have a diverse range of functions, which we often don't find at our own site. I mean, we have variability, of course, but it's temporal variability and can be much less than that you might expect if you extend these networks across a variety of sites. So I think one really interesting thing that might come out of this is how, how diversity and function are related across many different biospheres on the planet.
You mentioned you are still considering taking part. Now, what's your impression? Do you think this will also put an extra burden on you in terms of how the methods should be applied and standardization? And please speak freely.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think when we become involved, we will continue to do things as we have done. One of the challenges of this kind of involvement is that, we already have a long-term record. And part of the constraint on having long-term observation programs is continuity. And if you break that continuity with new methods, it's very difficult to look back. But, at the same time, methods are evolving all the time, and we would have to change methods anyway. So I think it's a good opportunity to assess the differences that these methods have on our long-term data sets, and it's a little extra work, but I think that the outcome is potentially an important one.
And have you already developed like a strategy how to integrate these new infrastructures and standards into already existing infrastructures at your station?
So, I mean, we already have a lot of infrastructure in place, and I think, as I said, we will continue to do that, and I think we will just try to layer in any of these new standards on top of that. And I think if most people go down that road, it will provide an opportunity to see what kind of detail it's necessary to do that. So we don't have any firm plans, because I think the idea of the GEOs and the standards involved is still evolving. So it's our integration of the infrastructure will evolve, I think, as the network evolves.
Are you also planning to take part in the OSD?
Yes.
Okay, and do you think this is a good initiative or a start to get this whole network going? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think from a scientific point of view, I'm not sure about the merit of everyone taking a sample at the same time, because but I think it's important that everyone does it at the same time, however, because it needs that in order to gain the necessary kind of weight. Just having a group of people doing everything at the same time, I think, is a good activity, and so that's one of the reasons we want to participate. It's fun to be part of it's an ambitious project, slightly audacious in some ways, and I think it's fun to be involved in that.
And in terms of outreach, do you think it's also a good way to promote your station within a larger context?
Yeah, definitely. As I mentioned earlier, I think that one of the advantages of being associated with this type of network is visibility of our own activities at a variety of levels, and I think the OSD is the kind of thing that would capture the imagination of the public, and because of that, I think it's particularly useful as an outreach tool, especially to engage children at different educational levels. So I think it has important uses in that way too.
And do you think it's maybe also possible to get the public involved in this whole initiative somehow?
I think if we equip them with a peristaltic pump and no, I mean, I think it's slightly different from these BioBlitz type experiments. It's relatively easy to go out and catch a butterfly or take a soil sample, and in order to sample the ocean, there are some things you need, including about the right filtration equipment. And but yeah, I mean, so I don't know, in terms of getting people involved in actually collecting samples, I think there are some restraints on that for this particular initiative, but I think certainly capturing the imagination of, everyone in the world is doing this sampling at exactly the same time, I think is, it's a good idea to to capture the imagination of the public indirectly if they cannot be directly involved in the sampling.
Would you agree that this GOES initiative and also the OSD as a starting point is a good way to monitor also human impact on the ecosystem?
Potentially, I think that's very dependent on the timescales which we use to monitor things. I know from oceanic environments that there's as much interannual variability and temporal variability often as there is spatial variability. So, perhaps taking one sample every year is not particularly suited to addressing the question of long-term change and human impact, but it has to start somewhere, and I think we will move from a position where we take one sample a year to where we perhaps take one sample a season. And I think if we establish a long enough data set, I think there's certainly potential for this type of activity to be able to address some of the changes, but that's something that's going to have to come over very long timescales.
So it's kind of like setting up a baseline and say, okay, from here we start and then we need a higher frequency?
I think so, yeah, but I think, of course, if you try to start at that point already, then it would be difficult for the project to get off the ground. So I think we all have ambitions about where this can go, but we're also quite realistic about some of the limitations in getting this thing set up. So having one sampling point per year is a fantastic way to start that, and hopefully that will provide the impetus to move forward and increase the sampling resolution and also the number of sites involved.
All right, I covered all the questions that I had on my list. If there's something you would like to add, now's your chance. So
I think I'm good.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
So thanks a lot for your time,
Yeah,
and
no, thank you.
have a good way back.
Yeah.
So the meeting is over.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, thank you very much.
All right.